Thank you for joining us for this Directors Briefing on Personal Protective Equipment, PPE. I'm Sue Dearden and I'm a solicitor specialising in health and safety at Finch, and with me today is Steve Cowley, who is an occupational hygienist. Cutting straight to the chase, Steve, what do people mean when they refer to PPE?
PPE, personal protective equipment, Sue, is any equipment worn or used, held by someone to protect them against a hazard at work.
Thank you. And that definition, I think, comes pretty much from the PPE regulations 1992. There are also 2018 regulations which impose a requirement that PPE has CE marking on it, but the 1992 regulations are really what we're working from, I think.
Yes, and those regulations take the principle from the Health and Safety at Work Act and give detail on why personal protective equipment is at the bottom of a hierarchy of controls. It's the last resort in terms of risk control.
And the regs also include provisions about getting the right equipment for the risk, checking, maintaining and replacing it when it becomes worn and damaged and so on. So let's assume that a company has got a reasonably competent health and safety manager in place who's done a risk assessment about what is needed and the PPE that needs to be used. What can a director do, Steve, because a director obviously has an overarching responsibility for health and safety in the business, but what can he or she do as someone who doesn't have detailed knowledge of the regulations to support the health and safety manager?
Well, as we've discussed in several of these directors' briefings, Sue, a director can be a questioner. As they're walking around the workplace, they can simply question why things are the way they are. And in this case, asking why is personal protective equipment being used rather than a better control, an engineering control, for example. So if someone's wearing a respirator, just ask their health and safety professional, why aren't we using exhaust ventilation? Why haven't we looked at controls that eliminate the use of a chemical or some way of controlling a dust so that it's not released when the chemical is handled? So it's that questioning role that I think directors can play.
And why is PPE at the bottom of the hierarchy of controls?
It's at the bottom of the hierarchy of controls because it is effectively letting the hazard exist in the workplace. You're exposing a person to the hazard and you're wrapping them up in some way to protect them from that hazard. So in the case of a respirator, which I mentioned just now, we're releasing the chemical and then putting a barrier on the person as opposed to controlling the hazard at source. If it's noise, we're releasing the noise into the work environment and then putting a barrier on the person. And that relies on the person keeping that barrier in place for the whole time they're exposed to the hazard. It assumes that anyone that walks into the workplace is going to have to put that protection on and maintain that protection while they're in the environment. So it's really not controlling its source, it's controlling out the person, hence the personal protective equipment. So you can see it's a demanding risk control in terms of management, and a director seeing someone maybe not wearing their PPE correctly or not wearing it at all can question and find out, well, where have we broken down in this process? Yeah. And maybe we don't have an effective management process we can use. We do have to move back up the hierarchy of controls.
That's a very good point. Thank you very much. I think that's probably a good topic and a good point to end our current series of Directors Briefings. We hope you found them useful, and of course if anyone has any questions or needs guidance from any of the amazing consultants and experts that we have at Finch and whose work involves these sorts of risks every day, helping business and industry to comply with their legal duties and checking and testing compliance in a range of areas, then please do get in touch.
And of course, if things do go wrong, Finch Legal can help. They have a great track record of keeping regulatory investigations out of court.
Thank you, Steve, and thank you everybody for listening. That was the last of our Toolbox Talks in the series of 12. If you've missed any, do go back onto our website and have a look for them. We will now be publishing an online quiz to check understanding of key points from the Toolbox Talk, so do have a look at as well at those. Thank you for listening.